Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She had walked in exactly 5 minutes late, boots scuffing the concrete floor, eyes scanning faces that barely registered her presence. The room smelled of stale coffee and burnt metal from the heater. It was cramped. Too many men, too many egos, and yet here she was, an equal in skill, yet invisible to their eyes. Her name was Captain Elise Kavanagh, though in most circles she was simply the woman who didn't speak unless necessary. Tonight, though, her silence would carry more weight than any words. The mission was clear on paper: infiltrate, gather intel, exit. Yet beneath the lines of typed orders and military jargon there was a tension she couldn't shake. Her heart pulsed with a rhythm of anxious precision, not because she doubted herself, she never did, but because she carried something heavier than her own life, something personal. Every operation was a gamble, but this one felt different. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant footstep a warning. She traced her fingers along the edge of the table, feeling the cold steel beneath her hand, imagining the rifle she would carry into the night. It was more than a tool, it was an extension of herself. She had learned to breathe through the hum of machinery, through the clatter of boots and shouted orders. She had learned to find calm where others found panic. And yet in this room she felt exposed, vulnerable, almost human. Sergeant Hayes leaned forward, voice low, like a confession to a friend rather than a command. "We've lost contact with Recon 4. Last transmission garbled. Could be nothing. Could be everything." Elise's pulse jumped. Her training told her not to react, to remain a still stone among rolling waves, but a flicker of fear danced in her chest. That could have been anyone, any operative lost, any mistake magnified. And yet she hid it, curling it into a private ache that no one would notice. The briefing ended and the room emptied. Elise lingered, staring at a map pinned to the wall. Lines and coordinates, cities and roads that might as well have been constellations to the untrained eye. Her mind traced the path she would take tonight, already imagining the sounds: the crunch of gravel underfoot, the distant bark of a dog that would alert guards, the rush of wind through an open doorway. She inhaled slowly. The city outside the window hummed with life, oblivious to the danger creeping beneath its skin. Night came fast, it always did, and with it a strange clarity. Elise crouched atop a ridge overlooking the target. Her rifle rested against her shoulder, scope glinting faintly under the moonlight. She could hear the faint crack of gunfire in the distance, but it felt distant, irrelevant. She had her own silence, her own battlefield. And yet there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Something that would color every decision she made. Her thoughts drifted to her younger brother, Sam, the reason she had joined the service in the first place. He had been reckless, naive, taken too soon by a mistake that might have been preventable if she had been home, if she had been there. That guilt had followed her into every mission, every firefight. It was both a chain and a shield, a driving force and a haunting whisper in her ear. Every life she saved, every operation she completed was a quiet penance. Every night she carried him with her, unseen, in the spaces between her breaths. The wind shifted. The smell of smoke, distant and acrid, told her that the city was breathing in flames she hadn't yet reached. A civilian car passed far below, headlights cutting through the shadows. She noted it, then let it fade. Focus was survival, distraction was death. Her eyes scanned the perimeter. Patterns emerged. Guards rotated, dogs sniffed the ground, cameras blinked in a rhythm almost musical in its predictability. Elise memorized it all, storing it like pieces of a puzzle she alone could solve. Her fingers itched for action, yet she stayed still. Patience was her ally tonight. Her silence was louder than the bullets that had already pierced this city, louder than the chaos that would inevitably follow. She thought of Captain Reynolds, her mentor, who had once told her, "Elise, in a war of noise, it's the quiet ones who survive. It's the ones who listen that see the truth." That advice had saved her life more times than she could count. Tonight she would listen. She would watch. And when the moment came, she would act. The first shot rang out far below. Not hers. A warning, a message, or perhaps just coincidence. Her muscles tensed, but her face betrayed nothing. She had learned long ago that showing fear was a luxury reserved for those who could afford it. She could not here, not ever. Hours passed. Each tick of the clock felt like a drumbeat of inevitability. Elise shifted slightly, aware of the ache in her knees, the tension in her shoulders. She reminded herself of what she had learned. Endurance is often more valuable than speed, observation more powerful than aggression, and even in the darkest moments, a sliver of hope could guide you. Then a sound she did not anticipate, a soft whimper, faint but distinct, coming from a narrow alley below. Her pulse quickened, and for the first time hesitation crept in. Was it a trapped civilian, an enemy operative? The sound carried no weight of malice, only desperation. And something in her stirred, responsibility, guilt, courage, a mixture she couldn't untangle. She lowered her scope, trained on the alley, every sense alert. Her mind flashed back to Sam again, his wide eyes, the way he trusted her without question. Could she ignore this whimper? Could she let this mission continue without answering a call that sounded, faint though it was, like a plea for life? Every operative knew the rule: no interference, no deviation. But she was not just any operative. She was someone shaped by loss, someone whose silence often spoke louder than words. Elise made a decision that would ripple through the night. Slowly, deliberately, she moved, careful to remain unseen. Her steps were light, calculated, her breath steady. Each movement was measured against the chaos around her, against the gunfire, against the moral weight pressing down like an invisible hand. As she approached the alley, the whimper grew louder. She saw him then, a young boy no more than 10, huddled behind a dumpster, eyes wide with fear. Dust clung to his clothes, streaked with blood, but he was alive. Alive because she chose to act. She knelt, hand outstretched, and whispered, "It's okay, I've got you." The sound of approaching boots made her heart skip a beat. Enemy patrol, or worse, a trap. She positioned herself instinctively between the boy and the shadowed danger, rifle ready, yet her mind a storm of calculations and doubt. In that moment she was not just a soldier. She was a protector, a sister, a survivor. Every training session, every lost comrade, every sleepless night had led to this moment of choice. The patrol passed without incident. Perhaps luck, perhaps skill. Elise exhaled slowly, feeling the weight in her chest ease just enough to allow a fleeting smile. The boy clung to her arm, trembling, yet trust gleaming in his eyes. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Sometimes, she thought, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She led him away from the alley, deeper into the shadows, knowing the mission was far from over. The night was still alive with danger, with secrets waiting to unfold. But for a fleeting heartbeat, she allowed herself to feel pride, hope, and a fragile connection that made the cold steel of her world feel almost human. Gunfire still echoed in the distance, but Elise Kavanagh's silence remained unbroken. It was her shield, her voice, her truth, and it carried her forward, step by step, into the darkness, where choices would test her more than bullets ever could. The city slept around them, unaware of the lives unfolding in its shadows. And in that silence, one thought lingered, almost like a prayer. Sometimes courage is quieter than fear and stronger than any weapon. Why did she feel the weight of every shadow before she even stepped into it? The alley had barely faded behind her, yet Elise Kavanagh's senses remained alert, her mind calculating, scanning, anticipating. The boy's small hand clutched hers, trembling, yet she held firm. She had learned that fear was contagious, but calm could be contagious too, if delivered with certainty. And tonight she had to be certainty itself. The streets were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Neon lights flickered in the distance, bathing puddles in sickly reds and blues. Every hum of electricity, every faint creak of metal, every scuff of distant boots made her muscles coil. Her past, etched into every nerve, reminded her that nothing in war was simple. No victory came without cost. And yet she couldn't stop moving forward. Not for the mission, not for the boy, not for the memory of Sam that drove her onward like a ghost. She could neither escape nor embrace fully. "Where's your home?" she whispered, voice low enough not to carry. The boy shook his head. Dirt streaked his cheeks, eyes wide with confusion and fear. He was not just lost, he was invisible to the world in a way Elise recognized all too well. A reflection of herself, maybe, before she became the soldier who could hold a city's danger in her gaze without flinching. The patrols were sporadic but relentless. Elise led them through back alleys and side streets, mapping escape routes in her head, noting weak points, memorizing obstacles. Every turn revealed more of the city's pulse, a living organism of danger and indifference. She could almost hear it breathing, lungs of concrete and asphalt. And in that rhythm, she felt the old ache of loneliness, the kind that only someone who bears both responsibility and grief understands. They stopped beneath the skeletal remains of an abandoned parking structure. The boy pressed himself into the shadows, silent and trusting. Elise crouched beside him, scanning the streets from her vantage point. Above, the wind whispered through broken beams, carrying the faint scent of smoke and oil. Her heart thudded, not with fear but with anticipation. Something was coming. She didn't know what, but instinct had never failed her. A voice broke through the night, a soft, almost hesitant sound that made her muscles tense. "Elise," she froze. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Carver, a communications officer and one of the few people who could pierce her silence. He had been tracking their progress remotely, a guardian angel in a headset, but hearing him in person added a new layer of anxiety. His eyes, wide with concern, took in the boy immediately. "Who's this?" She studied him for a long moment, weighing trust against operational protocol. The boy's eyes reflected the faint light, glimmering with unspoken questions and desperation. "Someone who needs to survive the night," she replied, voice even but firm. "We're not done yet." Carver nodded slowly. He didn't press. He understood her unspoken rule. In moments like this, decisions were personal before they were procedural. And in Elise's world, personal choices had long-term consequences that neither briefing nor orders could predict. As they moved deeper into the city, her mind drifted as it always did when adrenaline and exhaustion mingled. She thought of Sam again, the reckless, bright-eyed boy who had once trusted her to protect him from a world he didn't understand. His absence haunted her. His memory shaped every step she took, every life she swore to guard, every moment she allowed herself to feel fear. Guilt was both armor and weight, and tonight it whispered with every heartbeat, urging her forward. The mission itself remained a shadow behind her actions. The objective was still alive somewhere in the city, a target that had been carefully obscured by intelligence and urban camouflage. But in this moment, it was secondary. The boy's presence complicated everything. Extraction points, patrols, enemy snipers, they all now had to be considered not only for her survival, but for his. And each calculation carried moral weight she had long since learned to navigate silently. Hours passed. The city's pulse slowed, only to spike unexpectedly with distant gunfire and the occasional scream that was swallowed almost immediately by the concrete jungle. Elise had learned to compartmentalize fear, grief, guilt, but this child forced a reckoning she could not ignore. She whispered to him occasionally, small reassurances, fragments of normalcy. "It's okay. Almost there. Stay close." Words she rarely allowed herself to use, yet tonight they were shields as much as they were promises. A faint shadow moved ahead, not human but alive with intent. Her rifle lifted instinctively. She adjusted her scope, heart steady, training guiding her through the mechanics of observation. Then she saw it, a pack of stray dogs, snarling and cautious, eyes glinting in the faint light. Threat enough to alert guards, but not enough to stop her. She exhaled, letting the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. The city tested her in ways bullets never could, constant, unpredictable, unrelenting. They reached a narrow stairwell leading to an underground passage. Elise glanced at the boy, noting how he hesitated. Fear was contagious, yes, but trust could also be contagious. "I won't let anything happen to you," she whispered, though even she knew that promises were fragile currency in a night like this. He nodded, small and trembling, but moved forward. Below, the air was thick with damp and decay, the faint smell of mold mingling with gasoline. Footsteps echoed in patterns she could trace, friend or foe, she couldn't yet tell. Every sense alert, she guided the boy through the shadows, tracing paths only she could see, anticipating danger before it revealed itself. A sudden sound, a metallic clang, made them both freeze. Heartbeats echoed in the hollowed space. Elise knelt, rifle raised, scanning every angle. Then, relief, a rat scuttling into the darkness. But the momentary panic reminded her of vulnerability, hers and his. Even the smallest misstep could end a life tonight. She found a quiet alcove, and for the first time since leaving the ridge, allowed herself a moment to breathe. The boy leaned against her, exhausted, eyes wide but alive. She studied him, noting the dirt streaked across his face, the subtle tremor in his hands, the resilience that somehow shone through fear. He reminded her of Sam in ways that were both comforting and painful. Memories surfaced unbidden, laughter echoing through a sunlit backyard, promises made too late, a life stolen by mistakes she could never undo. Her thoughts drifted to the moral calculus that defined her life. Each mission was a balance of lives saved versus lives risked, of duty versus conscience. Tonight, she was acutely aware of both, and the weight pressed on her chest like a physical force. Yet she understood something fundamental. Sometimes, the right choice was not the easiest, nor the safest, but the one that preserved the humanity in a world designed to strip it away. Movement above caught her attention. A patrol, perhaps. She froze, instinct overriding thought. The boy pressed himself against her side, silent. She whispered, "Stay still. Don't breathe too loud." They waited, time stretching, each second a test of discipline. The patrol passed, boots clattering away, unaware of the small lives hiding below. Elise exhaled slowly once they were clear. A fleeting victory, but a victory nonetheless. She knew the night was far from over, the mission, the danger, the unknown threats that lurked in every shadow. But for a moment, the weight on her shoulders felt slightly less crushing. Sometimes survival was measured in inches, seconds, and whispers. Sometimes courage was quieter than fear. As they moved toward the extraction point, her mind lingered on the thought that had haunted her all night. How fragile life was, how easily it could be lost in moments of inattention, in choices made too slowly, in silence mistaken for inaction. And yet she pressed on, carrying both the boy and her own haunted past into the darkness, knowing that tomorrow, or the next heartbeat, would demand more of her than tonight had yet revealed. Through it all, she remembered Reynolds' words, "Listen, watch, survive, and when the world doesn't see the truth, let your actions tell it." Elise smiled faintly to herself, whispering under her breath, "Then let us speak in actions tonight." The city sprawled endlessly around them, indifferent to the lives unfolding beneath its skin. And in that silence she felt it again, the fragile, unspoken thread of hope that connected the living, the lost, and the ones determined to protect them. It was small, but it was enough. For now. Why did the radio suddenly go dead? Elise pressed the earpiece tighter against her ear, heart tightening in tandem. Static, nothing else. Not a flicker, not a crackle. She cursed softly under her breath. Carver's voice had been their lifeline, the thread connecting them to strategy, intel, and extraction. And now, silence. The boy noticed her tension and flinched. She swallowed and forced a calm she didn't feel. "We keep moving," she said, voice low but steady. "Stick close. No sudden moves." He nodded, small hands gripping hers like a lifeline. She could feel his pulse against her fingers, fast and erratic. Elise wanted to soothe it, to promise that the night would end safely, but she knew better. The city didn't care about promises. It only demanded vigilance. The passageway opened into a larger underground corridor, dimly lit by intermittent flickers of fluorescent light. Moisture dripped from the ceiling, pooling in small puddles on the cracked concrete floor. The smell of decay was overwhelming. She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus on the route ahead. Every shadow could conceal danger, every echo could betray their presence. Her training became instinct, and instinct demanded patience, precision, silence. She stopped at an intersection. Two paths. One led deeper into the underworld, winding through what she recognized from prior reconnaissance as a high-risk zone for enemy patrols. The other climbed toward the city's old subway tunnels, abandoned but mapped poorly on their current intel. Neither choice was safe. She paused, weighing options, heart hammering with the moral calculus she had practiced but never wanted to execute in real time. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Which way?" His voice trembled, betraying both fear and trust. Elise met his gaze, seeing reflections of herself in those wide, anxious eyes. She swallowed. "The subway, it's risky but less watched." Her mind raced, anticipating the consequences, but the decision had to be made. Hesitation now could cost both their lives. They moved. Each step echoed like gunfire in the silent tunnel. Dust rose from the floor, catching in the narrow beams of light slicing through cracks in the ceiling. She noted every sound, the distant drip of water, a loose metal grate shifting slightly, the faint scuff of boots somewhere far ahead. Every detail mattered. Every detail could mean survival or death. A sudden sound made her freeze. A whisper of movement, not mechanical, not human, just faint, deliberate. Her pulse spiked. She crouched, pressing the boy behind her. "Don't move," she breathed, almost to herself. Her rifle lifted automatically, trained on the origin of the sound. Another shift, then silence. Her instincts screamed ambush. But there was nothing there, not yet. Her mind drifted to Sam. She thought of his laughter, of the reckless grin that had lit his face even in darkness, of the promises she had failed to keep. Each memory was both a dagger and a shield, reminding her why she continued, why she bore the weight of others' lives with relentless discipline. She could fail again. She would not tonight. The subway tunnels opened into a cavernous chamber, abandoned trains rusting along tracks. Water trickled from cracks above, forming small reflective pools on the floor. The echo was deafening. She scanned the area carefully. Somewhere in the darkness, extraction awaited, or perhaps an ambush. She could not yet know which. Movement, a faint, deliberate shuffle, made her tense. She crept forward, eyes locked on the shadows. And then she saw it, a figure crouched near the edge of a platform. Not an enemy, not yet. A man clearly injured, leaning against a pillar. Relief mixed with caution. Her mind raced, ally or trap. In missions like this, the line between life and death, friend and foe, was almost non-existent. The man looked up. Fear flashed in his eyes. "Please help," he rasped. Elise's instincts screamed at her to assess, not to trust, yet she could not abandon someone in need. She motioned for the boy to step back slightly and approached. Every movement deliberate, controlled. She scanned his form, no visible weapons, injuries consistent with combat. She exhaled slowly, weighing the decision. "Name?" she asked, rifle still raised but lowered slightly. "Dante, Lieutenant Dante Reyes," he replied, voice strained. We were ambushed. Command lost contact hours ago. I don't know how many are left." His words hung in the damp air. Elise's heart tightened. She knew the weight of lost comrades, the silent grief of missions gone awry. And now, responsibility extended beyond the boy to this man. "We move fast. We stay quiet. No one gets left behind," she said firmly, more to herself than to him. She assessed him quickly, mobility limited, wounds severe but manageable, morale fragile. Every calculation mattered. Every delay could invite disaster. The tunnels stretched endlessly. Shadows pooled at unexpected corners. Water reflected the dim light, creating illusions that tested perception. Elise felt a familiar knot of anxiety, but she forced it into determination. She could not falter. She could not let fear dictate action. Not tonight. As they moved, Dante occasionally groaned, forcing her to adjust their pace. The boy's small hand held hers tightly, grounding her in the moral center of this chaotic night. She whispered reassurances, fragments of humanity amidst the tactical necessity. "Almost there. We're close. Keep breathing." These words were soft, but they carried the weight of promise. A sudden crash echoed down the tunnel. Elise froze, pressing herself and the boy against the side wall. Dante followed instinctively. Dust and loose gravel fell from above. Her senses sharpened, scanning the ceiling, the tracks, the dark recesses of the chamber. Nothing moved immediately, but she knew the danger wasn't gone. Patience, observation, survival, always survival. For a long moment, silence ruled again. Her chest rose and fell in controlled rhythm. The boy leaned against her, shivering slightly, and she tightened her hold. She thought again of Sam, of all those she had failed and all those she had vowed to protect. The emotional weight pressed down, but it also sharpened her resolve. They reached a section where the tunnel split into multiple lines. Elise studied the map etched into her memory from briefings, cross-referencing the visual cues in the environment. Every decision now carried life-or-death stakes. She realized that the path she chose next could define the night's outcome. The boy's hand trembled in hers and she squeezed reassuringly. "This way, trust me." Every step forward was measured. Every sound, every shadow, every smell was catalogued. The city above might seem indifferent, but in this underground world it breathed danger, and she was determined to navigate it with precision and humanity. For the boy, for Dante, for herself, and for those she could not save. Finally, they reached a junction marked by a rusted sign pointing toward an old service exit. Elise's heart lifted slightly. It was not safety, but it was progress, a choice, a move forward. She paused, listening. The silence was almost deafening. Then in the distance, faint murmurs, voices distant but human, not enemies, at least not immediately. Extraction, perhaps. Hope, fragile but present. She allowed herself a fleeting thought. Maybe they weren't completely alone tonight. Maybe someone above still cared. And for that small, fragile hope, she pressed forward. Through the tunnels, Elise carried the weight of lost friends, of responsibilities she could not delegate, of a moral compass tested by darkness. And yet, in every step, she remembered something vital. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the quiet decision to move forward anyway, carrying the vulnerable and the lost, even when no one else notices. As they neared the faint light of the exit, she glanced at the boy, then at Dante. Both alive, both still with her. And she realized silently that sometimes the measure of survival was not in the mission alone, but in the lives you protect while fulfilling it. She exhaled, a soft, almost imperceptible release of tension. The night was far from over. Danger still lurked. But for a moment they were together, moving through shadows with hearts aligned toward hope. And sometimes she thought that was enough. Why did the light ahead feel both like salvation and a warning? Elise's pulse quickened as they approached the faint glow of the service exit. Shadows danced along the walls, elongated and distorted by the flickering bulbs above. Every step was a negotiation with fear, every breath a silent promise she could not break. The boy's grip on her hand tightened, and Dante limped slightly behind them, wincing with each step. Elise's mind catalogued every sound, every texture, every potential threat. "Almost there," she whispered, more to herself than to them. Her voice carried a fragile steadiness. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders, not just for their survival but for the moral compass that guided her decisions. It had been a long night of shadows and choices, and every instinct screamed caution. The exit led them to a narrow alley, the city above almost unrecognizable in the darkness. Neon signs flickered in the distance, casting muted reflections on puddles and cracked pavement. The air was thick with humidity and the faint stench of smoke from distant fires. Elise's senses were hyper-focused, footsteps echoing off walls, the rustle of a rat in the debris, the distant hum of vehicles. Every element could conceal danger or offer a chance at freedom. Suddenly, a sharp sound shattered the fragile quiet, the metallic clatter of a barrel rolling across the street. Elise froze, heart hammering, eyes scanning for movement. Her rifle rose instinctively, trained on the origin of the sound. Dante and the boy mirrored her tension, and for a brief moment, time seemed suspended. Then a cat darted from the shadows, disappearing into the darkness. Elise exhaled slowly, allowing herself the smallest release of breath. But relief was fleeting. She knew the city held more than stray animals. It held enemies, hidden, calculating, and patient. She motioned them forward with a subtle tilt of her hand, keeping low. Every step was deliberate, careful, measured. The moral weight of leaving someone behind or misjudging a threat pressed heavily on her. She had lost friends before. She would not add new names to that tally tonight. Dante stumbled on a loose grate. Elise caught him instinctively, supporting his weight as he steadied himself. "You okay?" she asked, voice low but firm. Pain and fear mingled in his expression, but he nodded. She studied him for a moment, seeing more than the surface. He carried guilt, frustration, the invisible scars of missions gone wrong. She knew them well, they mirrored her own. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Are we safe now?" His voice was small, vulnerable, weighted with trust. Elise knelt slightly, meeting his gaze. "Safe is a word we'll earn, not one we're given," she said softly. He nodded, still holding her hand, still clinging to the fragile hope she had become the vessel for. They moved through the alley, approaching a partially hidden service door leading into a nondescript warehouse. Elise's gut tightened. Intel suggested this was a temporary extraction point, but her instincts warned of potential compromise. Every shadow could conceal an enemy operative. Every sound could betray their presence. She signaled them to halt, scanning the perimeter. A sudden movement caught her eye, a figure crouched near a stack of crates. Not fully visible, just a silhouette. Elise's pulse quickened. "Identify yourself," she commanded, voice steady but firm. The figure froze. Then slowly hands rose in surrender. It was another survivor, a young woman with a scratched face and tattered clothing. Relief and suspicion collided in Elise's mind. "We're trying to reach extraction," she said cautiously. "Are you alone?" The woman nodded, eyes wide, fear evident. "Yes, please help me." Elise studied her carefully. The moral imperative was clear. Leaving her behind was not an option, yet every addition increased risk. Still, she could not abandon someone in need, not again. "You're coming with us," Elise decided, voice unwavering. As they approached the warehouse door, the tension grew. Shadows shifted inside, and Elise could feel the presence of others. Friendly or hostile, she could not yet discern. The air was thick with anticipation, every step a negotiation between caution and necessity. She signaled for them to stay low, moving silently, hearts pounding in sync with hers. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, crates and equipment scattered haphazardly. Elise's eyes scanned the room, searching for the extraction team. She noted every shadow, every movement, every potential threat. The faint hum of a generator suggested life nearby, but the possibility of ambush loomed. Then a voice broke the tension. "Elise, is that you?" It was Carver, relief evident even through the radio static. Her heart eased slightly, knowing extraction was close, yet danger still lingered. "Yes," she whispered into the earpiece. "We're here, 3 civilians, 1 injured." Instructions followed quickly, terse and precise. Extraction would meet them on the far side of the warehouse. Time was limited. Elise's mind calculated. Cover, concealment, timing. Every movement had to be synchronized. Every misstep could mean disaster. The woman she had rescued clung to her, trembling. Elise placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent reassurance. The boy's small hand remained in hers. Dante's injuries slowed them, but morale held steady under Elise's guidance. She felt the weight of their trust as a tangible force, grounding her amidst the chaos. Movement in the shadows too deliberate to ignore. Elise froze, rifle up, eyes narrowing. Another operative, enemy. She could not afford assumptions. The figure stepped forward. Recognition hit. It was a comrade returning from an earlier sweep, bringing reinforcements. Relief and tension intermingled. They were not alone, yet the mission was far from over. The team moved together, shadows stretching, footsteps silent but purposeful. Elise's thoughts drifted briefly, memory of Sam, of promises made, of the weight of responsibility she carried alone. She had survived this far not just through skill, but through moral clarity, the quiet determination to protect life where she could. Extraction arrived. Vehicles hidden in shadowed corners, engines humming softly. Elise signaled the team forward. One by one they moved, careful, deliberate, aware that every second could tip fate. The warehouse echoed with tension, but progress was tangible. She glanced at the boy, then Dante, then the rescued woman. All alive, all relying on her. And in that moment she understood. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the quiet resolve to move forward anyway, to carry others through darkness when you yourself felt the weight most. As they boarded the extraction vehicle, Elise allowed a moment of reflection. The night had tested her body, mind, and soul. Shadows had threatened, but determination had prevailed. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of survival, responsibility, and moral choice settle within her. Sometimes, she thought, heroism was not loud or celebrated. Sometimes dignity didn't speak. It simply acted, and tonight she had acted. Why did the silence feel louder than the gunfire? Elise gripped the door frame of the extraction vehicle, the metallic edge biting into her palm. The engine hummed beneath them, a steady rhythm against the chaos of her thoughts. Outside, the city sprawled in darkness, broken by occasional streetlights and distant fires. Every shadow could conceal danger. Every step beyond the warehouse could be the difference between survival and disaster. The rescued woman shivered, huddled against Dante, who grimaced with every bump along the uneven road. The boy's small hand squeezed hers, a quiet plea for safety. Elise swallowed, her throat tight, and forced a breath steady enough to mask the storm inside. Her mind traced the night's path. Decisions made, lives saved, lives at risk. Each choice carried weight. Every hesitation could be fatal. A crackling voice on the comm broke the tension. "Status check, Kavanagh, Carver," calm but with urgency threaded through the static. Elise responded, steady. "Vehicle secure, civilians on board, ETA 5 minutes to rendezvous." She felt the weight of the responsibility settle heavy in her chest. 5 minutes could stretch into eternity. She scanned the streets through the tinted windows, eyes moving in patterns trained over years. Roof lines, alleys, reflections on glass, movement of debris. Each element told a story. Each anomaly could be a threat. The vehicle jolted sharply and Dante groaned. "Easy," Elise muttered, adjusting her position, trying to shield him without losing control. She glanced at the boy, his eyes wide, his fear mirrored in her own heart. Protecting them meant more than physical defense. It meant absorbing the moral weight of every potential loss. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the road ahead. Reflexively, Elise raised her rifle. The figure froze, crouched low, then disappeared behind a dumpster. Adrenaline surged, but her training dictated patience. One mistake, one wrong move could ignite chaos. "Stay low," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. Her voice carried authority, the quiet command of someone who had been through enough to know that panic was contagious. The rescued woman nodded, gripping the boy's arm. Dante's eyes flicked to her, unspoken questions in his gaze. Elise offered a small nod in return, reassurance without words. The vehicle slowed near an overpass. Elise's instincts screamed that the route could be compromised. She crouched, rifle scanning, heart a metronome. The moral calculus was relentless. Push forward, risk ambush, save lives, or retreat and risk leaving innocents in the shadows. Her grip tightened on the rifle. Fear was present, but determination dominated. The boy whispered, "Are we going to be okay?" His voice trembled. Elise's chest tightened, a pang of guilt slicing through the adrenaline. "We're going to be okay," she said firmly, though inwardly she questioned the certainty. Survival was never guaranteed. She had lost comrades, friends, people she had sworn to protect. Tonight, that memory clung to her like smoke. Another sudden jolt. The vehicle skidded slightly over uneven pavement. A muffled shout came from the back, then silence. Elise's gaze snapped to the rear window. Shadows moved against the walls of abandoned buildings, indistinct but deliberate. Her pulse accelerated, each beat echoing the tension of the moment. Carver's voice returned over the comm. "Elise, be advised, possible hostiles ahead. Alternate route prep, but terrain is compromised." She exhaled slowly, evaluating the decision. Lead with caution or stick to the plan and risk exposure. Every choice carried consequence. Her hand hovered over the radio, ready to communicate, yet hesitation lingered. Then the figure from earlier emerged ahead, blocking the narrow road. Elise froze. For a heartbeat, time was suspended. She raised her rifle, the safety off, finger poised on the trigger, but recognition dawned slowly. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face, gaunt, determined. It was one of her own, a field operative separated during a previous mission. Relief washed briefly over her, but tension remained. "Hold your fire," the operative said, voice low, cautious. "Ambush cleared, route secured. We're the backup." Elise lowered her rifle, heart still racing, the moral tension still palpable. Allies, yes, but the weight of their choices had been hers to carry, and it would not be lightly dismissed. The vehicle moved forward cautiously, each turn calculated. The streets remained quiet, almost deceptively so. Elise's thoughts drifted briefly, Sam's memory, her own losses, the cost of survival. She allowed herself a single, fleeting reflection. Bravery was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to carry the weight of fear and act anyway. A sudden loud crash echoed from a nearby intersection. Tires skidded, the boy screamed, and Dante flinched. Elise's instincts reacted faster than thought. She dove forward, shielding the civilians with her body as the vehicle swerved. Outside, shadows of armed figures were revealed, quickly vanishing into the night. A trap, possibly. A warning, likely. She could not pause to consider. Movement was survival. Carver's voice crackled urgently. "Elise, proceed to the bridge. Hold position until extraction team confirms pickup." Elise nodded, though he could not see her. She adjusted her path, navigating debris, potholes, and broken street signs. Every inch forward demanded concentration, every decision a blend of skill and moral calculus. The bridge loomed ahead, dark and silent, except for the faint hum of traffic in the distance. Elise's pulse synchronized with the rhythm of the night. They were close, but not yet safe. She could feel the weight of the boy's gaze, the tremor in the rescued woman's grip, the subtle signs of fatigue and pain in Dante. Each life was a tether to her responsibility, a reflection of her moral resolve. As the vehicle approached the bridge, Elise glimpsed the extraction team waiting, vehicles camouflaged, soldiers poised, eyes scanning the surroundings. Relief collided with lingering tension. They were not safe yet, but the first real victory of the night was tangible. She exhaled, allowing a brief pause to feel the weight of survival, the cost of choices, and the moral clarity that had guided her through the darkness. Sometimes, she thought, survival was not heroic. Sometimes it was quiet, calculated, and moral. Sometimes courage was not loud. It simply acted, and tonight it had carried them one step closer to dawn. Why did the night feel alive with whispers? Elise crouched behind the barrier of the bridge, the city lights glinting faintly off the water below. Every sound carried weight. Distant sirens, the hum of traffic, a bird's fluttering wings. But beneath it all was the pulse of threat, hidden and patient, waiting for a mistake. Her hands tightened on her rifle, knuckles white, eyes scanning every shadow. The extraction team had arrived, their vehicles parked strategically, engines off to reduce noise. Elise's heart still raced, each beat a drum of tension. Dante leaned against the wall, rubbing his injured side. The boy clutched her arm, eyes wide, silent. The rescued woman trembled, a bundle of fear and hope. And Elise felt it all, their reliance on her, the fragile thread of trust stretching taut across the night. "Hold your positions," she whispered into the calm, voice barely audible over the wind. The team nodded, eyes sharp, trained, wary. The bridge was narrow, exposed, and a perfect choke point for anyone seeking to exploit hesitation. Elise's mind cataloged every risk, every possible angle of attack. She had trained for scenarios like this, but training was theory. Tonight was reality. A sudden movement, a shadow along the far railing, made her freeze. Reflexively, she aimed. The figure paused, hesitant. Elise's pulse surged. Friend or foe, identification was impossible in the low light. She clenched her jaw, breath steady, waiting. Then recognition hit. It was an operative she had worked with months ago, presumed lost on another mission. Relief washed over her, tempered by the knowledge that danger still lurked elsewhere. But there was no time to dwell. From the shadows, a sudden flash of movement revealed armed figures attempting to flank the bridge. Elise's instincts surged. "Incoming!" she yelled, voice slicing through the night. The extraction team reacted immediately, rifles raised, suppressive fire exchanged. The sharp crack of gunfire punctuated the darkness, echoing off concrete and steel. Dante flinched, and the boy buried his face against Elise. She moved instinctively, shielding them, guiding them behind the narrow barriers. Her body ached with fatigue, yet adrenaline sharpened her senses. Each moment was a negotiation with mortality, each breath a delicate balance between courage and fear. Amid the chaos, Elise noticed a civilian van parked suspiciously near the bridge entrance, a potential threat or a trap. Her mind raced. Extracting the civilians meant passing it, but how could she ensure safety without exposing them further? She made a split-second decision. They would move under cover of suppressive fire, timing each step with precision. The night air was thick with smoke, scent of gunpowder and the faint brine of the river below. Elise's vision flicked between threats, her own team and the civilians she protected. Every heartbeat seemed amplified. Every step could trigger disaster. She felt the moral weight pressing against her chest. One misstep could mean death, not just for herself, but for those she had sworn to safeguard. As they moved, the rescued woman whispered, trembling, "I don't know if I can." Elise turned, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You can, and you will, one step at a time." Her voice was calm, grounding despite the chaos surrounding them. The boy squeezed her arm, a quiet reminder that hope could exist even in darkness. The bridge narrowed further, gunfire sporadic but precise. Elise scanned for patterns, opponents' angles, timing, and cover. She calculated, anticipating, leading her team and civilians with every ounce of experience. Each step forward was measured, deliberate. The moral calculus never ceased: protect, advance, survive. A figure leapt from the shadows ahead, armed, aiming for the civilians. Elise's rifle cracked. One shot precise, ending the threat instantly. Time slowed, the echo of the gunshot lingering. She felt a mixture of relief, guilt, and grim satisfaction. Every life saved carried the weight of those lost before, a reminder that duty was rarely clean, often painful. The extraction vehicle waited at the far end. Elise motioned for the group forward, maintaining cover, scanning continuously. Each movement brought them closer to safety, but the night had taught her that danger lingered even in victory. Every shadow could conceal a new threat, every corner a new moral test. Finally, they reached the vehicle. Elise helped Dante inside first, then the rescued woman, and finally the boy, holding his hand until they were secure. Her own body relaxed slightly, though her mind remained sharp. The moral satisfaction of survival was never complete. It was tempered by the memory of what had been sacrificed to reach this point. As the vehicle pulled away, Elise allowed herself a moment to look back at the bridge, silent now, save for the faint ringing in her ears from gunfire. It was a battlefield, a moral crucible, a test of courage and conviction. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of lives carried, of decisions made, of choices that define not just survival but character. Sometimes, she thought, courage is quiet. It is not measured in explosions or headlines. It is measured in restraint, in careful calculation, in the willingness to bear the weight of life and death without flinching. And tonight, they had survived because someone had chosen to act, to move forward, to protect. The night stretched on, dark and infinite. Yet amidst the shadows, hope flickered, fragile, persistent, undeniable. Elise let herself believe it could last, if only for a moment. And in that fleeting instant, she understood that true heroism was not loud or celebrated. It simply endured quietly, like the pulse of life in the darkest night. Why did silence feel heavier than the gunfire? The vehicle rolled through the empty streets, engines low, tires whispering against the asphalt. Elise sat stiffly, her body aching, every muscle a reminder of the night's tension. The rescued boy slept lightly on her lap, his small hand curled around hers. She dared not move lest he wake. Her eyes scanned the shadows outside, half expecting threats to leap from the darkness. But the streets remained quiet, too quiet. Dante leaned against the door, bruised, bleeding from a shallow gash across his temple. He didn't speak, didn't complain. And Elise, watching him, felt a pang of both pride and guilt. Pride that he had survived, that he had endured. Guilt that his suffering had been part of her responsibility. The weight of leadership was never in the strategy alone. It was in the lives tangled in her decisions. The rescued woman shivered, clutching her coat, eyes distant. Elise could see the trauma etched in every line of her face, the fear, the exhaustion, the disbelief that anyone could survive what they had just endured. And in that moment, Elise recognized herself. Every mission left a mark, a memory of what was endured, what was lost, and what had to be carried silently forward. The calm crackled softly, breaking the fragile quiet. Carver's voice, calm but firm, filtered through. Status check. Report casualties and injuries. Elise responded, measured. Everyone accounted for. Minor injuries, civilians secure. ETA 5 minutes to base. The 5 minutes stretched. Hours, it felt like. The night outside seemed to press closer, shadows folding into themselves, testing her composure. Memories surfaced unbidden. Sam's laugh, the first mission she had failed, the family she had left behind. Every recollection sharpened her focus but also widened the ache in her chest. She had chosen this life. And yet some nights she wondered if the cost had been too high. Dante broke the silence first, his voice low. "Do you ever think we do too much?" Elise glanced at him. His expression was half anguish, half exhaustion, as though he carried the burden of questions he couldn't answer. She thought about all the missions, the lives saved, the lives lost. She thought about Sam, about the boy she now protected, about the rescued woman who might never smile the same way again. "We do what we must," she said softly, "and we carry it." The boy stirred, opening his eyes, peering at her through lashes damp with sleep. "Will it be okay?" he asked, voice trembling. Elise's throat tightened. She wanted to give him certainty she didn't fully feel, but she chose honesty softened by resolve. "Yes," she whispered. "It will be okay." She held his gaze, willing him to believe it, willing herself to believe it. As the vehicle neared the base, the lights ahead shimmered against the darkness. Extraction complete. Safety for now. Elise's mind wandered to the bridge, to the faces of the fallen, the fleeting moments of heroism and terror, the decisions that had shaped every heartbeat of the night. Survival was a choice. Responsibility was a burden. Courage was the quiet endurance of both. When they arrived, medical teams rushed forward. Elise stayed close, guiding the civilians from the vehicle. The boy clung to her hand, his trust unspoken but palpable. She felt the weight of that trust, heavy and unyielding. She handed him over to a medic with a gentle reassurance. "He's safe," she said. And it was true, though she knew safety was never permanent, never guaranteed. Dante limped beside her, grateful, silent. The rescued woman offered a tentative smile, fragile but genuine. Elise returned it, feeling a flicker of warmth in her chest. But the warmth was tempered by memory, flashbacks of missions past, colleagues lost, choices made. The night had given them life, but it had demanded pieces of their souls. Later, in the quiet of her tent, Elise removed her gear, each piece a reminder of the night's burden. She traced the scars on her hands, the small abrasions on her arms, the faint bruises forming under fatigue. Each mark was a story, a testament to perseverance, to moral endurance, to the silent courage that defined her. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wash over her, letting memory and reflection intertwine. She thought of Sam again and the promise she had made, to live, to protect, to endure. Every mission was a step toward that promise, a step toward personal redemption in a world where chaos often ruled. And tonight she had survived. They had survived, but survival was not victory. It was a pause, a breath, a reminder that courage did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it endured silently in quiet reflection in the choices that went unseen but mattered most. Elise crawled into her cot, the boy's image still vivid in her mind. She listened to the hum of the bass, to the distant murmur of voices, to the faint rustle of the night beyond the tent. She allowed herself a single, fragile thought. They had made it. They were alive. And that, in its own quiet way, was enough to hold on to. Sometimes, she realized, heroism is not in the spotlight. It is in the patience to endure, the humility to act without recognition, the moral courage to carry what others cannot see. And as the night settled around her, Elise understood that this was the truth she would carry always, that dignity, courage, and hope were not loud. They simply acted silently, persistently, and profoundly. The night lingered, quiet but alive, a testament to endurance, to survival, to the fragile but indomitable strength of those who choose to stand when chaos reigns. And in that stillness, Elise closed her eyes, carrying the weight of the night and the quiet resolve that tomorrow would come, and she would still act, still endure, still protect. Why does the dawn feel heavier than the night? Elise stepped out of her tent, boots crunching softly on gravel, the horizon tinged with faint pink and gold. The world seemed still, fragile, and unfamiliar after hours of chaos. The city beyond the base hummed quietly in the distance, unaware of the night's trials, unaware of the lives balanced on a knife's edge. She took a slow breath, tasting the cold morning air, letting it fill her lungs with the faintest sense of hope. The boy was asleep in a cot nearby, wrapped in a blanket, small chest rising and falling with each calm breath. Dante had already departed for medical treatment, leaving Elise alone with the quiet. She touched the edge of the blanket, a gentle, protective gesture. His survival was a weight she welcomed, a responsibility she would carry beyond the mission, beyond the war, beyond the exhaustion. Every choice she had made, every risk she had taken, was now crystallized in this fragile moment of life preserved. But the victory was not without reflection. Elise's mind wandered to those they had lost, friends, comrades, lives caught in crossfire, each absence a silent reminder that courage was measured not only in survival, but in the awareness of what survival demanded. She felt the ache in her shoulders, the tightness in her chest, a physical manifestation of the moral weight she carried. And yet, in that ache was clarity. She had acted decisively, ethically, and humanely. Her gaze fell on the horizon, where light was slowly bleeding into the cityscape. Memories surfaced, Sam's laughter, the sharp sting of previous failures, the fleeting smiles of civilians she had rescued. She realized something profound. Heroism was not the absence of fear or the guarantee of perfection. Heroism was the quiet acceptance of risk, the unwavering commitment to protect, the moral courage to act even when the outcome was uncertain. A soft hum reached her ears. She turned toward the base's perimeter and saw figures moving, fellow operatives, medics, the team she had guided. They were tired, marked by the night, yet their presence was a reminder that no mission was undertaken alone. Even in the most intimate and solitary moments of leadership, the bond of shared experience grounded her, lent her strength, and softened the isolation of responsibility. Elise walked slowly toward the edge of the base, letting her mind wander. She remembered the whispers of the night, the bridge, the shadows, the faces of the rescued civilians, Dante's quiet endurance, and she allowed herself to feel the complexity of those memories, fear, relief, pride, and sorrow. Life was not simplified into victories or defeats. It existed in tension, in nuance, in moments where courage was measured not by applause but by the steady continuation of action. A soft breeze stirred the edges of her hair, carrying the scent of dew and distant earth. Elise closed her eyes, letting the world settle around her. She reflected on her own journey, why she had chosen this life, what she had sacrificed, and what she hoped to reclaim. Sam had been her compass, the memory of someone lost to war guiding her moral compass, reminding her that every choice, every action was tied to love, loyalty, and the human imperative to protect. She bent down slightly, brushing her hand across the boy's cot once more. "You're safe now," she whispered, knowing that safety was fragile, temporary, yet profoundly necessary. His small trust in her was a beacon, a measure of her success, and a reminder that redemption was not a grand gesture but a collection of quiet acts done with unwavering resolve. Elise turned toward the horizon again, letting the sunrise illuminate her face. The shadows of night lingered behind her, but the light ahead was undeniable. She understood that the world she protected would never be free of chaos, that loss was inevitable, that every mission carried moral ambiguity. But she also knew that dignity, courage, and hope were not defined by perfection. They were defined by perseverance, by continuing to act, even when unseen, unheard, uncelebrated. She took a final, steady breath, letting it anchor her. The city awoke in slow rhythms below. The boy stirred, blinking, eyes wide with sleep and innocence. Dante's footsteps approached, and in that convergence of lives, survival, and reflection, Elise felt the truth of her journey. That strength was measured quietly, in choices made, burdens borne, and the relentless pursuit of humanity in a world that demanded both toughness and compassion. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And Elise, standing at the edge of night and day, knew she had acted. She had endured. She had protected. And in that quiet, resolute moment, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that the next mission, the next dawn, would find her equally steadfast, equally human, and equally ready. The horizon glowed softly, and for a fleeting moment all the chaos, all the fear, all the weight of responsibility was balanced by one undeniable truth: courage endures. And so did she.